I hate that we have to write this chapter in your story, but if we're going to write it, let's make it a damn good one.
Welcome to Black Cancer, a podcast about the nuances of our lives as people of color, told through our cancer journeys. I'm your host, Jody Ambury. Our guest on today's episode is Marissa Thomas, breast cancer survivor and founder of For the Breast of Us, a breast cancer community for women of color. You can find the links to their website and social media in the show notes. You know, after I received my diagnosis, it took a few weeks before I texted my doctor, wait, do I have cancer? It was after that I started to search online cancer forums of any kind to help make sense of my experience. And let me tell you, it provided so much relief. Well, up until a point. Being a woman of color is always the lens through which I experience the world, and I just couldn't find anything at all that could meet me there. I'm so glad that For the Breast of Us exists now, because I for sure could have used it back then. A space similar to this podcast to be in community with other folks of color, grappling with the intricacies of grief, support, and needing to be seen in a system that wasn't designed to see us. Where else but on our platforms can you engage in a conversation about how lotion saves lives? And you'll have to wait until the last third of this show to get to that. P.S. There's also a story at the end where I basically admit that I'm a terrible human being. Don't come for me. We all have our journey towards growth and enlightenment. I'm still on mine. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a nice and juicy one. Here's my conversation with Marissa. That you can feel a certain way, you have all these beliefs, and then you talk to a doctor, and then things start to shift.
Right.
To varying degrees. I think I am, even as someone who has been in the healthcare system for many, many years, way more years than I wanted to ever be. Mm-hmm. Even as someone who has a background in health, who talks about race and racism all the time, I'm still fighting to find my way to talk about these things authentically in healthcare spaces with doctors and professionals. How do you feel about it? Because you're also in the healthcare space, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
So do you mean authentically in a way that they can understand, or authentically from your own perspective?
That's an interesting question, because this is the whole thing, right? Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective?
Right.
For me, I want me being right to be effective.
See, and that's funny, because for me, I always say, do you want to be right, or do you want to be on the right side of history?
Okay, bring them to task. Okay.
Because, sometimes when you're on the right side of history, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're right, but you're still making a difference on the right side of history. If you understand what I mean by that.
I do understand what you mean by that. But you know how they say Black and brown folks have more of a collective mindset?
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, can I just think about myself?
I mean, we are always in the background. We're not necessarily in the forefront when it comes to a lot of conversations, not just healthcare. For example, this past October, when we did our Breast Cancer Awareness Month campaign for the Breast of Us, our campaign was called the Naked Truth Project. Mm-hmm. And that's where women were able to show themselves authentically, pictures of themselves after breast cancer surgery, reconstruction surgery, whatever it may be. And when we started posting the photos on Instagram started censoring us and removing the photos, even though in their censorship, it says if there's any photos of like mastectomies, things of that nature, they won't be removed. So what we noticed is that at first, a lot of the Black and brown women's pictures were getting censored and taken off. And then eventually, some of the white women's pictures started disappearing too. it just started happening. Like everybody's pictures just started being taken off. They got this
dropping off the internet.
Yeah. It was like a Thursday, and, people started tagging Instagram on their feeds and saying, stop, removing our photos, what's going on? And it turned into this big thing, right? And I know some people are like, well, should we do this? Is this okay? And my thought process is like, well, do you want to be right in PC, or do you want to be on the right side of history? Where the right side of history to me is, it's like, yes, you do tag Instagram and you do tell their big people like, hey, look at this. This is a problem. Not only do we not see pictures of brown and Black women all the time, when it comes to, if you walk into a plastic surgeon's office and you want to see pictures, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to have a lot of pictures of my skin color to see what it's going to look like after I have a surgery. But so now we're creating this platform and these pictures for other women to see what it looks like. And now you're taking that away from us too. So yes, I want to be on the right side of history, where it's like, I'm going to tag Instagram and I'm going to tag these people and say, you need to stop doing this because it is important, the work that we're doing. So that's what I'm saying. Do you want to be right and like not ruffle feathers, or do you want to be on the right side of history and say, no, this is wrong?
Can I tell you what's been happening with me though?
Yeah.
So I'm in this pain management program at Swedish, and it's a really intensive program. It's 12 hours a week. Do you know the program? 12 hours a week.
I do.
Okay. For 4 weeks, right? And I'm in the program and I have 4 or 5 providers. Everyone's cool. Except for this one guy, I'm like, something's up with him. We'll call him Chad. It's not his name, but not dissimilar.
Okay. Okay, Chad. Hey, Chad.
Yeah, hey, Chad, what's up? So I get it. Mind you, they're not paying me to be there. I'm not paying them, right, to be there. Everyone is there because, they're trying to support people who are experiencing chronic pain. And again, there, Chad has asked me all these questions. I'm answering all the questions. And he asked me, did you watch the lectures? I said, yeah, I watched the lectures. And I almost felt like he was testing me. Well, what stood out to you? I'm like, I did do the reading, professor. Thank you, And so I'm sharing with him, the neuroplasticity and all this stuff was really interesting to me because it connected with X, Y, and Z that I've been exposed to before. And I saw that you cited this medical journal study, but I couldn't find it online. Could I get a copy of that? And he says, well, I don't want to bore you with things that you already know, if you know all of this stuff already.
What?
And I'm like, I said, what's that? I don't know who said that? Who said that?
Right.
Right. And then he said that I wasn't engaged in the program. And so I'm like, well, what does engagement look like to you?
Right. That was going to be my question.
Thank you, Marissa. Right. And he says, well, and then he starts slumping back in his chair. He's like, your body language. I'm in the pain management program. It is in my file. I have a spinal cord injury. I had back surgery. Mm-hmm. And I said, I didn't know that body posture was going to be an indicator of engagement.
Right. And
75% of my face is covered with this mask. And so you tell me what you think lack of engagement looks like. So I'm answering all your questions. I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you. And then this is so it becomes this whole thing. We had the rest of that time where I'm supposed to be relaxing and managing my pain and trying to reduce the load on my nervous system. Mm-hmm. I have this big conflict with him. We actually resolved it, had a good conversation. Everything's cool. Over the weekend, I said, cool, glad that happened, whatever. Oh, during that conversation, I said, my recommendation to you is that you evaluate some of the biases that you're bringing into this.
Right.
And he goes, I don't have any biases. And I'm like, I don't know how you are serving the public with that orientation. So.
That's just like saying, well, I have Black friends, so I can't be racist.
Hello, right?
The same thing, yeah.
So fast forward, to make a long story short, I share that there was a conflict. These were the issues that, were challenging for me. We resolved this conflict. I think that as your team, you should talk about it. Mm-hmm. I show up on Tuesday, ready to do my program. My whole schedule gets shifted. They completely remove him from my program to the point where I can't even be in the group sessions. And so I'm like, well, I don't know why I'm coming here if and I didn't ask to be removed from this program. And so all of this stuff is happening. I have spent 50% of my sessions since I sent that email, which, mind you, this is something that he should have already disclosed because it happened in my session.
Right.
Have to spend 50% of all the things that are supposed to be relaxing to me, kind of defending, my position and all that. And so I've been really settling with, like, when things are happening to you in the healthcare system, when you talk about like being right versus being on the right side of history, should I have just sat there with these microaggressions and holding that to try to get what I can get out of this program? Because now saying something about it is actually reducing my access to healthcare.
Yeah.
So how do you make that gamble of like, hey, I actually need you. I need to actually have a deep conversation with you about reconstruction or this and that and that. The things that you're saying to me or the resources that you're providing to me or whatever are not centering me. You're not giving me any options. Do I say something about that? Like in an interpersonal setting, right? Like in your own healthcare management.
Right.
Or do I, save it for my girlfriend, save it for somebody else and just get what I can get? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think that's part of the issue when it comes to Black and brown people in healthcare in general. I think we don't speak up a lot when it comes to things that way, or if we don't like a provider, if they treat us wrong, we don't go above their heads to say, this is the experience that I have, and this is why I'm firing this provider and why I'm moving on somewhere else. Like even my sister was telling me, she just recently had surgery on her ACL, and they sent her to a physical therapist that they send all their patients to, and she didn't like the physical therapist. She kept telling them when she's doing these exercises that she's in pain. So she researched and found another physical therapist to go to. And so the original physical therapist is still calling like, well, we want you to come back. Like, why aren't you there? And, she's like, well, I haven't even responded to them. And I'm like, respond, tell them why, so that they know these are the reasons why, because I'm sure you're not the first and you won't be the last. And I think as Black women, we don't, providers, medical providers, they don't, I'm sure, they don't listen to us whenever we're complaining about pain or whatever. They're just kind of like push through, get through it. Which sometimes you can. And I get that point, but I get what you're saying, that it's hard because you have to make a judgment call of like, am I going to say something and then have the risk of that I'm not going to receive the same care that I would have gotten if I didn't say anything? Or do I just not say anything and then I go vent to my girlfriends and my family members? I would say as somebody that's in healthcare, I mean, I'm outspoken anyways. So I would still say something and I kind of push other people to do the same thing. I also say, I feel like if you have a good rapport with anybody that you're dealing with on your healthcare team, you definitely let them know and kind of set the stage for them and just be like, hey, we're going to have a frank conversation here. I don't like X, Y, and Z. I don't want this to affect my care. Like say that all out to them, because as your provider saying, well, I don't have these biases. It's like everybody comes with a set of biases that they already have. I don't care who you are. I don't care your race, your nationality, whatever that may be. But you need to check that shit at the door.
Yep.
It's hard for a lot of us to do that, right? Even me, even you, anybody. So I think having those frank conversations, and if you can't have it with your medical provider, then you should be having it maybe somebody else on your medical team. Because if you can't get through them, then if you talk to that other person, maybe they can, and they could quote unquote dumb it down in their language so that they can understand where you're coming from. So I get it's a double-edged sword, but I would still say something.
I mean, I said something and I would say something again. What I try to do when I make these judgment calls is, what am I saying?
I think what you're trying to say is when you make these judgment calls, you're trying to decide in the forefront, should you be making these judgment calls, and is it okay for me to do it? And is it going to affect me in the long run? Maybe.
Yeah. So yes. Yeah. So exactly. So when I make these judgment calls, I always try to ask myself, what is my goal?
Right.
And I think as Black and brown women, we have multiple goals, right? I want to do something for the culture. And I'm also trying to get this healthcare. You feel me? So sometimes your goals are in conflict.
Right. And help whoever's going to come out, behind me too.
Exactly. Like, so it's not just about me. It's about the person coming up behind me. And at the same time, it's also about me. And I think it's tough to manage that, especially if you don't have a lot of exposure to dealing in these healthcare spaces, which are positioned to be these, you know, high regarded, kind of elitist, very sterile, not just in its like bacteria levels, but you know, in its look and its feel and the white coats and all that kind of stuff. But you know, you mentioned you're in the healthcare field, you have exposure to these types of people. So can you just give a sense of like your professional background, just so we have a sense of what you know, what you come to the table with?
So I have been in healthcare, it's 2021, which is crazy to think. I've been in healthcare for about the past 17, 18 years. It'll be 18 years in August, which that's crazy to say as well. I started off as a medical assistant in a primary care provider's office, small primary care provider. I got to do everything there. And so I know that that has taught me everything that I know. She let me do a lot of hands-on, and I learned completely a lot. She was actually one of the first medical providers in the Seattle area who started treating transgender individuals. And so I got to do and see a lot of that as well too. So that was pretty dope.
Heck yes, represent.
So from there, I moved on to working at Children's Hospital in their ENT department. So I moved into specialty. And then now I'm over at the University of Washington in the inflammatory bowel disease department. I still have my medical assistant license just so I can do injections, patient triage, things of that nature on the medical side. But I am the healthcare program manager for the inflammatory bowel disease department. So I do a lot of admin work too, and working with insurance companies. We all love that.
Oh yeah.
I fight with insurance companies pretty much all day long, helping patients try to get their medications approved. So I know how to navigate the system really well. And so that's one of my goals, is to help other people to be able to do that. Because I get it, it's hard. And sometimes you want to give up. A lot of times we want to give up, or you just don't even want to start the process. Because like you said, it's so sterile. And it's just like, oh, do I even want to do any of this? But it's, once you get it down, it's pretty easy. And the things that you can say to trigger them to be like, okay, so this person isn't playing. Like, I know when I was going through chemo, there was stuff that I would say and they'd be like, okay, so she's on her shit, so we cannot pass anything past her. So it's just being able to say those type of things so then they know.
I love that. I sent an email to Swedish yesterday and I was like, so can I have in writing why you're reducing 30% of my care program? I just need that in writing. And then they emailed me back with like a whole new schedule that wouldn't have that reduction. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm curious, like, do you feel the irony, or I don't know if it's irony per se, but rather, I guess, this extra jab from the universe to be someone in healthcare, and then you face this major health crisis, right? So not to say that people in healthcare don't get sick or face health traumas, but it's kind of like, damn, me too, et tu, Brute, you know? So, you know, can you share a bit about, I don't know how it landed on you, of how it hit you when you found out about your breast cancer, being in this health space for so long?
Well, it was weird because I've also worked in radiation oncology. So I got to see cancer patients there too. So for me, it's like, oh shit, like I know what I'm getting ready to go through. It's definitely a slap in the face, but it's also a blessing in disguise at the same time, because now you get to be on the patient side, and you also get to see how it looks like when they go through this process and when they have to work with different individuals. For me, when I was doing my treatment all at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, it was amazing to see that a lot of the medications that they had to get approved before I even started my treatment, I had no hands on that. Like, they took care of all of that. So that's amazing. Where I know for some patients, they literally have to get involved. They have to call their insurance company and fight with them and tell them why they need this medication while their doctor's doing the same thing. I didn't have to do that. So that was amazing to see, being able to, from the flip side of it, having to get a blood draw every time I went in, the lab being behind every single time and being like, okay, so this is why patients take like 2 hours to come to their appointments, because the lab is just like moving at a snail's pace. Yeah. So it's interesting to see the whole process in that, but then also mentally be able to give thanks for patients and know that when you see them, you're actually seeing people. They're not just numbers. Because I think with healthcare, we've turned it into, these aren't people anymore. They're just numbers, and we're turning them in. Like, The fact that primary care providers have to see patients every 15 minutes is ridiculous to me. How can you crunch down anything in healthcare within 15 minutes? You can't. It's dumb.
No.
So being able to see that and be like, okay, so these are people. I know what that's like. Like, and people come with other things. You may be coming in there because you're diagnosed with breast cancer, but what's going on at home? Are you married? Are you going through a divorce? Do you have enough money to eat every day? Did you have enough gas in your car to get here? You know, are you, going through stress? Are you depressed right now? Like, there's all things that they come into that. So you're not even dealing with just breast cancer. You're dealing with these subsets and realizing that these are people. I think that was the beautiful and the blessing in disguise for me.
And I think that's why I always try to choose providers that kind of care about me. I don't know. It's weird. Like, I don't know if other people do this, but I turn the personality dial way up on that first visit. I feel like it's a first date. So I'm like, I need this person to like me so I can get some good health.
Right. And that bedside manner is like, that's for real. Like, if you enter that door and like, we don't have a good connection, like, I don't think this is going to work. I need to go find somebody else, because I need somebody that's also going to be as open and honest with me. Like, if I ask you a question, you're not just going to bullshit me through the whole time. You're actually going to answer it for me, give me all the information. And I think that's another thing too with providers. When they come to seeing people of color, they don't want to give them all the information. They kind of feel like they want to water it down. It's like, no, give me everything. Tell me what all these side effects are going to be. Tell me, after I have this chemo, I'm going to be on my ass. Tell me that, at the end of the year, when I'm done with treatment, this is what I'm going to feel like. Don't just tell me what you want me to know right now. Give it all to me so I can plan out exactly what I want to do.
Exactly. Speaking of work, I think when I got my diagnosis, I started applying my work things, like how I would manage a health program and how I would design interventions is kind of how I approached how I was going to make decisions about the surgeon and what would happen with my treatment and all that kind of stuff. But then you reach a point where you can't be the project manager and the project at the same time.
Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, you can, but it's not going to be easy.
Like, was that stressful for you? Like, how did you manage like balancing, because you speak about it in a very integrated way. Like, here's the patient side, here's a provider side, patient provider. Did you feel like you ever had space in your journey to be the patient?
I did.
Do Black women ever get that? I don't know. Is that a thing? Do we get that?
I mean, it's hard. But I think you have to have a really good core support system around you. One thing that I forgot to add when you had asked me about my experience in healthcare, I actually also have a bachelor's degree, a bachelor's in healthcare administration. And the funny thing about it is when I was diagnosed, I was in the last year of my program of that. And so I had to dial back getting my bachelor's degree. Like, I was on set to graduate that summer and I couldn't, because now I had to like dial back because I can't take a full load of classes and do chemo at the same time. Like, who does that? Wonder Woman wouldn't even do that. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
So I think with having my support system, that helped a lot because it took a lot off of my plate, even though I still felt like I had to be strong for everybody around me. But they were able to let me just focus on myself, make some choices and decisions when it came to my healthcare and what I wanted to do. And that's one of my biggest things that I say for people. It's like, whenever you don't ask people or tell them, if you need something, let me know, because nobody's ever going to let you know anything. That's like one of my worst pet peeves. I'm just like, just do anything that somebody's going through. Like, send them something from Amazon, send them something from Target. You can send anything. Everybody loves Amazon and Target. I mean, hello, look at how they've thrived during this whole pandemic. There's something there for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think as people who are a support system, if they just dial in and you can do those little things around them, that actually helps. And so for me, I think that helped me because I was able to just focus on my health and get through this and make it to the end, versus having to, like you said, be a project manager of like, okay, well, let me like figure out this and let me figure out that. And at that time, my son was 13. So then also having to parent by myself too is a bigger thing as well.
That's a lot. So managing school, first of all, I feel like your chemo treatment could have definitely counted as your last year of your bachelor's. I mean, that was hands-on experience. I think that's a practicum,
I'm like, why don't you just graduate me? Just give me my
just
bachelor's
call
degree. Like, right, yeah. You want me to write a dissertation? I can do that real quick. It's like, I can just talk you through it.
Exactly. I'm spending more time doing healthcare administration in, these couple of months than any of these kids doing in their whole program.
I can tell you my whole process.
Exactly. That's so wild. So I think when you're managing school, you're managing parenting, you're trying to, manage yourself and also take care of yourself in this whole process. I think it's easy to say like, oh, look at all that strength and resilience. Look at how she's pushing through her pain and she's all the things that they say to us, right? And so I feel like there are elements of our journey, right, where this disproportionality in the strength narrative that like we're always strong, but we don't get to kind of show our personhood. This narrative of strength erases our personhood. And so the ways that we struggle, the ways that we experience sadness and depression and stress, right? Like we can really find ourselves in this completely natural and normal kind of muck of trauma. These are normal things that people go through.
Right.
And so what was the muck for you, like following your diagnosis and your treatment journey and just all the different ways that you were, yes, being strong, being resilient, parenting, doing all that kind of stuff. And what was actually happening for you, Marissa, the person?
I mean, I was depressed. I hit definitely a lull in the middle of my treatment to where I was depressed and noticed it. I know people around me noticed it too. My dad had said to me one time, he was just like, you're always quiet, but you're really quiet right now. And I just didn't have anything to say. I'm like, what do you want me to say? Like, I feel dead.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this, but I'm having to do it. I didn't choose this, but this has been chosen for me. So that's one of the biggest things when people would say like, oh my God, like you're just one of the strongest people I know. I'm just like, I'm only doing this because like, what else do I have to do? You would do the same thing if you were in my shoes. And the biggest analogy that I would say that I would tell people all the time is that as soon as I was diagnosed, I compare it to me being like in a valley. Like I just put my head down and got through it, right? It's like you're in a storm, you just put your head down and you just get through it. And then once you're done with treatment, you get to the other side. And for everybody else, it's like this rainbows and butterflies, the sunshine, like, oh my gosh, you're so done. Like, this is great. Inside, you feel really cool too, because you're like, man, everybody's here at the finish line with me. They're clapping and you look up and you see the sunshine and everything and it looks nice. But then you're like, oh shit. You look behind you and you're like, I gotta go through all of that trauma and everything that I just went through because I need to unpack that. Nobody else around me can unpack that. So I have to unpack this past 6 to 9 months that I went through and figure it out. And not to mention that I'm not the same person that I was 6 or 9 months before. So now I have to figure out that whole process. And so a lot of people don't get that because they're just like, you're at the finish line, you're done, you've made it through. Yes, but they don't understand all of the trauma that you have to unpack through that. And it's a lot. It's a lot to get through. You're not going to get through it within a day, a week, a month, a year, nothing. Like that is years that you have to get through and that you still may be going through. Like I'm coming out on 5 years out. And I would even say like there's definitely moments and times where you just remember, or you have like an anniversary or something that comes up and you just have to be like, man, I actually went through that. I actually went through it. And does it make me stronger to some people on the outside? Yes. But for me, it's so much more deeper than that I still have to go through and remember who I am and what I've been through. So yeah, I would say that's definitely the muck that even I'm still trying to dig out of.
Girl, I feel so seen.
I mean, it's so much. I would always tell my best friend, she would call or text me because I would get my chemo. I did AC, which is adriamycin and Cytoxan, which is one of the worst type of chemos that you could ever get. It's so dose dense, like it just knocks you on your ass. I'd get it on Thursday and then Monday and Tuesdays were like my worst days. And she would call or text me and she would just be like, how are you feeling? Where are you at? And I would be like, I'm in the valley of death. And she knew what I meant. And it literally felt like I was being ran over slowly back and forth by a semi truck is what that felt like. And then you would come back up. So then like Wednesday or Thursday is when I'd start feeling better and I start feeling like myself. But then mentally, that's a mind fuck, right? Because then you're doing good these days, but then that following Thursday, you got to go through that again. So you mentally have to prepare for that.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot too, right? And so that's why I said with that analogy, it's like you're in the valley and you get to the end and everything's okay, but then you still have to unpack all of that you went through.
Yeah. And in a sense, the way I'm visualizing it too is you're in this valley and people are treating you like you're at the end, right? You're at the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I'm at the other side. And then you realize where you are. You're like, oh, I'm not on the other side. Like, I'm still in the valley.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Everyone's like cheering.
Yeah, they're cheering.
They're
Everybody's
like cheering for you. Like, so, okay, this is so off the plan, but you ever heard of those Tough Mudder obstacle races and stuff? It's like these mud runs. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Tough Mudder is like the waiver to do it is 4 pages. You have to initial next to every single paragraph, and they call it the death waiver. They're literally like, if you die, is on you, right?
Right. You signed up for this.
You signed up for this, and it's like 12 miles of just craziness. So this is when I was peak fitness, and I was doing this Tough Mudder, and there's this part where it's like a half pike. Mm-hmm. And so you had to start way back. They had the line, and you had to run up this half pike, and you can't actually touch the top. You have to jump, like kind of leap off the half pipe to grab the edge. Like, I don't know what I signed up for. So I'm like, I got this, right? And I'm running, and I'm running up the pike, right? I make that last kind of jump and to grab the thing, and I barely get like 3 fingers up, but I'm hanging on. And then there are all these people like, yeah, we got this, like a lot of guys do this too. And they're pulling me up, my brother's like pulling me up, and they got up. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, back to cancer, you're at way back here, right? This is kind of where you start. And you're like, all right, bet, diagnosis, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And you're running, you're doing this thing, and then you kind of get up the half pike and you reach for the edge. Mm-hmm. And you don't hit it.
Right. That's what I say. Hopefully you grab it. Hopefully you get it.
And then the more you keep trying, and I saw people do this, they're like, they miss it. They run back immediately. Run. And the more you keep going back and forth, you don't have the energy to go. But the energy at the ledge does not stop. They're like, yeah, we got this.
Right.
So I feel like what I kind of went through, what I'm hearing a little bit in your story too, is like, you go, you don't reach it. And the more you keep trying, you don't reach it. And you can't give that same effort. Mm-hmm. In my case, I feel like the people at the edge kind of stop cheering after a while.
Yeah, they do.
Where it's like, come on, girl, you can do this.
Right.
Can't be standing here waiting for you to get it together, right? And, what I did is I just stopped trying. Mm-hmm. And only recently I'm running, and I had enough strength to grab the edge.
Yeah.
And even now, I don't even think I'm over it. Mm-mm. But I have a good grip. And that is way better than where I was running. Like, okay, so tell me, like, how's that landing on you?
It definitely is. And I would say, I've heard from other women who have kind of said the same thing. They're trying to find themselves. Like, how do I find myself? How do I get back to the person that I was? And, it's that whole thing of like, just keep going, just keep pushing through, and you keep pushing through. And like you were saying, like, you got it and you grabbed the ledge. And I'm sure even for that, it's like when you got it and grabbed the ledge, who was all there? Who was there at the end? And even if there was, like, it may only be like 1 or 2 people, man, and them is your people, man, because they will just hold on through it. And it even goes to the point of where people are like, well, you're done with treatment, but you're still always talking about it. Like, that was one of my biggest things. I remember telling one of my friends, like, I think people are tired of hearing about this. Like, they don't want to hear about it anymore. And then I just got to the point where I'm just like, I don't care. Like, it's a part of me. It's not my life. So I definitely don't want my whole life to be cancer. But it is still a part of me. There's different parts that are going to come up. There's going to be triggers that are going to come up for me that I just can't help that. And, either you want to hear it and you want to listen to it or you don't. You can unfollow me. You can scroll past. You can do whatever. It is what it is.
Because like you would have left anyway, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I wonder in all of this, what fueled your instincts to create For the Breast of Us? And how do you balance that with having For the Breast of Us and having your life and having those things both integrated and separate in some way? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is just wanting to see more Black and brown women. Like, I knew that they were out there. Myself and my work partner, Jasmine Sowers, we both realized that there were a lot of other women who were like us that were being diagnosed, but we didn't see them. We both found women online, particularly on Instagram, who were diagnosed, but there wasn't necessarily a group for us. And just wanting to be able to talk to other women. One of my really good friends that I met, Christina, I met her on Instagram as well. And she was a Hispanic young woman, and we both just connected and clicked. And especially nowadays, because of the pandemic, everybody's meeting virtually or meeting each other online. And so we wanted to create a space to where women of color could have a space of being diagnosed with breast cancer and sharing. Like, we definitely have different experiences. Yes, breast cancer doesn't care who gets it, but our experiences are different. And it's kind of like I was telling you before of like, you're going to see a plastic surgeon. Do they know how to operate on women who have melanin in their skin and know that we're probably going to keloid and what that's going to look like? So just being able to share those type of resources with each other and the stories, and knowing that we're not necessarily alone and there's somebody that's like you that's going through that, is an amazing experience. So that's one of the reasons why we created For the Breast of Us. And it's great. We have a private Facebook group called Breast Cancer Baddies. And there's over 700 women in there. It's sad to say that, there's 700 women who have been diagnosed with breast cancer, but I mean, that is the reality. And I'm sure we're only touching just the surface of it. But being able to have that group, and then women can just ask any type of questions of like, hey, before my hair fell out, it was kinky. So when it comes back, is it going to come back the same way? Or what is it going to look like? How long is it going to take? Asking resources of like, I'm in North Carolina and I'm looking for a second opinion. Who is there that you guys can recommend? It's just little things like that. Because as we all know, word of mouth is big and it's huge.
Especially for us. Like, you got to vet that person for me before I roll up in there.
Right. And just finding other women who are like you, whether they live down the street or they're 3,000 miles away. It's been great to see. And, hopefully once this pandemic is over, we can all get together, do that good old Black sister rock hug that we all probably want to do with each other. I think when it comes to what you were saying about finding a balance, what's funny is one of the topics recently in the group was somebody commenting on that they needed to find a balance. Like, I don't want to be about cancer all the time. And for me, that's been a big thing too. If you go on my personal Instagram page, like, there's a little bit there, but there's not a lot. And I'm pretty diligent in that because I feel like I do want to keep those two separate. They are integral in some places, but like for my own personal, social media, like, this is me, this is who I am. And that's what I want people to see. And when it comes to For the Breast of Us, you can definitely go over there and you can see what work that I'm doing over there and how you can get involved too. But I want to keep those separate because I feel like, I have so much more going on. I have things going on with my son. I have my own, life going on. And like I said, there's times where they intersect each other, like in October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Sometimes those are going to intersect each other and that's fine. But I do think having that healthy balance is good because it can get draining when you do start connecting with a lot of women and some of them unfortunately start passing away. My friend Christina, she passed away from metastatic breast cancer. And I remember after she passed away, I was just like, I don't want anything. I mean, even before then, but even then more so, I was just like, I don't want to connect with other women who have been diagnosed and I just want to leave this alone. But then realizing that this is a part of my purpose and what I'm supposed to do has kind of fueled that too. But just wanting to keep those two things separate because they are two different things. And I want to have my own life and live. And I want to talk about drinking wine. I want to talk about Tupac, like, and sometimes some people don't want to talk or they don't want to hear about that, and that's fine.
Yeah. But as you're kind of recounting the space of creating a community of people who are disproportionately going to die, particularly being young, I think that we as younger people haven't had the longevity of like life experience.
Right.
To maybe weather some of those things, because I think another community that's similar is the elder community, where you have friends that maybe you just met, or you have friends that you've known forever, and maybe every other week you're going to a funeral and all that. And so I think it's harder and I think it makes it a little bit, at least for me, I felt more isolated to be experiencing something that people don't generally experience until much later in life. And so How do you relate to your contemporaries? But, Christina was your contemporary, and you had so much in common. And so can you just share a little bit more about like who she was and who she was to you in your work, and who you were and how you were navigating that time?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, Christina and I met on Instagram, both in the middle of going through treatments. And I seen her comments on somebody else, like another breast cancer survivor's post that they had made. And I just went to her page because I'm like, oh, this is, she seems pretty cool. So I went to her page and then seen that she was diagnosed around the same time. So I had sent her a message. And like, to the middle of the night, probably like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, I'm high on prednisone, so can't go to sleep. Yeah. And I sent her a message and was just like, hey, it looks like we were diagnosed at the same time. And, this is my name. And I just kind of wanted to say hi. And I told her then, because I was in the midst of a really bad depression at that point. And I had even said, I'm like, I'm going through a really bad bout of depression. So I just wanted to reach out, and maybe we could connect. And she immediately responded and was just like, hi. And from there, we just developed a really good friendship. We exchanged phone numbers. We talked every single day, whether it be about, our side effects, whatever the case may be. And that was April of 2016. And then we met each other for the first time in person in July of 2016. After I finished chemo, we did what I called a chemo bachelorette party.
I love it. I'm here for it.
That my friends had set up for me. And so Christina lived in the Bay Area. And so we went down to San Francisco because I've never been. And we did that. And we met and just clicked and hit it off. And it was just a great friendship. I could talk openly about breast cancer and cancer in general, where a lot of times when you look online, people only want to talk about like the good parts, whatever that may be. But I'm just like, no, what is it like when you're having a hot flash, or, you got to go, your son tells you at the last minute that he needs football cleats, and, you don't want to put on a bra and you're hot flashing, and you don't want to put a wig on, so you have to run to the store. So somebody that could just relate to that, or just relate to the fact of like, what is it like being married? So Christina was married. So what's it like being married and having to go through menopause at the age of 28? Menopause comes with its own set of things of like, how are you, this may be too much for people, but I'm going to say it anyways, but how are you being married and having to be sexually pleasing to your husband while you're going through cancer treatment? Like, I would just ask her stuff like that, and she would be open with it because nobody was talking about it. Granted, I wasn't married, but I'm like, I still want to know what this is like. So just being able to have that type of relationship with her. We both finished treatment around the same time. And then a year later, she found out that her cancer had returned and it metastasized pretty much all through her body. I got to see her in May of 2018. She had told me that her cancer had spread to her brain at that point. And because I was in healthcare, I kind of knew what that meant, unfortunately. So I went and seen her, surprised her, seen her over a weekend, and that was really good. It was nice to see her then. She apologized the whole time. It was like, I know you hate seeing me this way. And I'm just like, I don't care. I just said that I'm able to see you regardless of whatever it may be. And then she unfortunately passed away July 5th of 2018. That whole year leading up to the time that she passed away, just seeing women coming out who were also being diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, who were Hispanic and Black. And I remember Christina and I had a conversation at one point, and I was just like, why aren't they researching us? Like, if we're being diagnosed with some of the most aggressive breast cancer, why are we not being researched?
Yeah.
Like for me, I was diagnosed with stage 2 estrogen positive breast cancer, and my estrogen was only 35%. And usually if your breast cancer is hormone receptive, it's over 50%. So mine was rare, something that they haven't seen before. And so they treated me like I was triple negative, and triple negative is one of the most aggressive breast cancers because it's not hormone based. So they literally throw everything at you. And a lot of women of color are being diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer at a younger age. So that, usually means if they're diagnosed at a younger age and it's really aggressive, a lot of times they are going to move to being metastatic or stage 4, unfortunately, like in Christina's case. So I remember Christina and I were talking, just like, why aren't they researching us?
Like, you don't want to know about this?
Right.
You don't think that's interesting to you?
Right.
Interesting academic pursuit,
Right. And I remember asking my oncologist about it. And even when Jasmine and I were at one of the conferences, somebody had said, well, you guys don't want to participate. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, you can't just take that from your past experiences or whatever you may think and think that we don't want to be researched. And I can tell you that is one thing that For the Breast of Us has proven wrong, because researchers and people now will reach out to us and say that we need women of color for this project, and we will post it in our group and women will just start answering it. So it's like, yes, we do want to be researched. We just need to be informed of what that research is and what that looks like for us.
What's interesting? Like, that connects me to the issue I'm having with Swedish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you say, oh, y'all don't want to be researched. But it's like, well, what happened in that interaction with me, with you and y'all? What was that like? Because, maybe you're turning us away. We're coming here for help. We're coming here for care. And there's something happening where the next steps aren't proceeding.
Right.
And I think it's such an easy narrative, especially now with COVID and the vaccine, like, oh, Black people don't want to take the vaccine, or y'all don't want to be researched. And it's just like, whoa. Slowly roll, right?
Right.
One, these things are not true, and two, there's so much trauma in the healthcare system. There's so many things to undo.
Right.
To keep us healthy, to keep the research current and helpful to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that research is only a small piece of it. Like you were saying, there's so much trauma in healthcare. Like, research is only a really small, like 20% of that. Like, if you want to unpack everything that's going on in healthcare, there's a lot more that's going on in there. Like, how about when your doctors come through the door and they just see a Black woman and automatically think that you're not going to listen to them, or that you're going to have an attitude, so then they don't want to give you all the information that you need. We could start there if you want to, or we could start where, when it comes to insurance companies, how people automatically think when they see you that you have Medicaid and you don't have good insurance. We could start there if you want to start there too. Like, there's so many different places.
Exactly. And then you look to us as there's something that we're doing that's wrong. When you have hundreds of years of bad practices, persistent racism and both interpersonal and structural interactions, it's just like, it's me against all of y'all. And then you looking at me like I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
Get the fuck out of here.
Right. Exactly. So, I think, that was some of the things. And just, going back to even Christina, like you were saying, it's like being young and having to lose people. We don't talk about grief a lot. We don't talk about what that looks like, especially within communities of color, and how, just mentally how draining that is, instead of us just sweeping that under the rug. And so me having to deal with all of that, like, it's like, okay, well, breast cancer. And then I have this friend that passed away who's close to me. I've never had anybody that close to me pass away. And so having to unpack and deal with all that, I mean, it's a lot.
How did you navigate that when, Christina was nearing the end and then afterwards?
I think because her and I had so many frank conversations, I don't really want to say it was easy, but it was like, I knew when it was coming close to the end, her and I would have conversations about like what that would look like. So I also think that helped, because that helped prepare me mentally and emotionally. It didn't help. I don't think that helps anybody And, in general, I always say the one thing about when somebody passes away, it's like the silence is deafening once they're gone. And so I think for me, it just was being open with how I felt, definitely getting a therapist and talking with them about it, and just wanting to go with my own pace. Like, it's still an everyday process, coming up on 3 years since she's passed away. I wouldn't even say that it's easier, but I think it's just talking out loud and thinking that she's there. If she just pops up in my mind and being like, okay, she's popping up in my mind, so let me just, say this or whatever it may be. And just recalling some of the times and the moments that her and I had together, and then knowing how happy and proud she probably is of some of this. We're not supposed to cry during these things here. I should have made that as like a rule. Like,
there's no crying on podcasts.
Just of how proud she probably is of some of the work that I'm doing for the rest of us, and how, the one thing that I loved about her is she continued to live life regardless. That's one of the things that I want to help with women. It's like, living your best life regardless of the circumstance is one of the things that I always say. And Christina definitely did that. She took a lot of pictures like the last year of her life, and nobody really understood why. And now looking back on that, I see why. And so that's why I love taking pictures, because I'm like, you just never know. And that's one of the moments that you can always have for people, And so, I want to tell people, like, just take pictures, whatever they are, like, be present in the moment. Life is fleeting, and you just never know when somebody's time is going to come. And so I love that she just lived her life on her own terms and how she wanted to live it. And that's probably one of the best things that I could tell people to do. Like, she took her kids to Disneyland. She's just like, I know I have stage 4 cancer, but I don't care. My kids want to go to Disneyland. They want to go to Universal Studios. We're going to go. And just went. And even at the moment when she did that, like, I couldn't understand why. Kind of pissed me off too, because I'm just like, no, like, you should be at home resting. But now looking back on it, I'm just like, no, she wanted to create those memories for her kids.
It's like she was still getting a sense of her personhood.
Right.
Obviously, I don't know what her experience is like, but I could just imagine when your medical needs increase, right? Mm-hmm. When you get more and more medical attention, like, does it erode your sense of self, where you just, like, kind of what we were talking about before, you become a patient.
Right.
Right. You're not yourself anymore. Like, you're not yourself with this condition that you're managing. The condition takes precedence and priority over who you are.
Right.
And so I could see that, or at least what I'm gathering from that is always holding yourself first. Mm-hmm. As you're kind of navigating this.
Yeah, holding space for yourself, for sure. Because we definitely get lost. You get lost in what the treatment is. You get lost in whatever your health is. But holding space for yourself and who you are and what you love to do, I think we should definitely, like, tell people that, like, when you get somebody that's on your cancer healthcare team, having somebody there that being like, what are you doing for you? What does your self-care look like? Does that mean that you're going to get your nails done, or, you're going to sit somewhere and just have your own time, but being able to hold that own space for yourself?
What do you think happens to you, like, as a person when you lose someone? Like, how do you process who you are when someone who mattered to you or someone you loved is gone?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Like, a really good question. In the blog, one of the questions I had asked in there was like, how do you process who you are, and then also the person that you've lost in that process too? And I was meaning that only not for yourself, but like people that you also lose along the way. And I think it's a question that I'm still trying to answer, really. And, it's just a day by day process. Just realizing, like, who I am, the relationship, definitely holding the relationship that Christina and I had close to my heart. Like, there's definitely little things that, like, will pop up in my mind where I'll remember her. One of the things that we always did is we always seen the number 1111. Her birthday is on November 11th. So whenever we would see that, we would always say, call each other up or text each other and be like, make a wish, friend. So whenever I see it now, I still say that out loud, because to me, it's like she's still listening, right? And so, she can make a wish, and I'll make a wish on her behalf and for myself too. But I think just remembering who that person was and who you are helps carry you kind of through all of that grief. And grief is like, it's a cycling process. Like I know Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's wife, kind of written about that recently too. And, you know, there's some days where there's good. There's some days that are bad. I hate using the cliche term of like, you know, just pushing through, but just moving through that, moving through grief, because it is a cycle. And there's always, it's going to be continuously being that. And I think once you do realize that, it's easier, because I think people just think like you're just supposed to go through this and then you're done and then that's it. And it's just like, no, like that's bullshit. It's not how that goes. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Vanessa Bryant, because I was listening to something and they said if they had done COVID shutdowns earlier, then Kobe Bryant would still be alive because he wouldn't have gone to the basketball game or like been around so many people.
Okay.
And so like what as I was thinking about that is sometimes in the cycle, I don't know if you start kind of going through counterfactuals, or maybe if I did this or maybe if that, then things would maybe did it, and it can be maddening.
It definitely is. Like you wonder like, oh, you know, maybe if I, like in Christina's case, like maybe if I found a doctor for her to get a second opinion at, like maybe she, you know, she would still be here, or, you know, maybe if I told her this or I told her that, but like you can't, you'll get into a whole like rabbit hole with all that.
Yeah.
So like there's no reason to do that, because you're in this moment right now. So you can always think back of like what you wanted to do or what you could have done. I mean, even for me recently, like I just recently went through a breakup, right? That's a whole nother topic.
Oh, listen, we could talk about it after. I don't even know the situation, but I know this person was trash. I just know it.
Thank you. But just realizing like, you know, if we talk about the relationship, like that served a purpose, right? So even with, you know, me and Christina, like, I think I came to the realization of like that relationship that me and Christina had definitely served a purpose. She helped me in more ways than I can even imagine. One of the things that she helped me with was just being open with being diagnosed in my journey. Like when I was diagnosed, I was angry. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. All of my social media was private. Only if you were close to me would you know what I was going through. And now everything's open. Like I'm open book. You can ask me anything, I'll tell you. And she was that. Like she was always open. She was real and honest with what she was going through and who she was. And she used to always tell me, like, just tell people, just be you, be your real authentic self. And people are going to love you for that and they're going to navigate that. And so just realizing that those relationships definitely serve a purpose. There's always a lesson in everything. And just being okay with that instead of wondering what if or what the past is. Because all you're going to do is just keep going over and over in that in your mind of what you could have done, coulda, shoulda, woulda. But coulda, shoulda, woulda is not going to help you today, tomorrow, or the next day.
That is a sermon. If that could ever just land in my head, my whole life would be so different.
Right, because you can always go back and think, oh, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? And I mean, it's not going to change what today is.
Yeah.
We don't have a time machine.
No, we do not. No, we do not. It's like Christina was not just a friend and a kind of comrade in this struggle, but like a support, like a huge part of your support network as you're navigating everything. Did you find it difficult to be supported? Like, I know you had a specific relationship with Christina, but did you find in that time, was it hard to be supported and Christina just kind of broke through that, or what?
I think it was hard to be supportive on both ends, right? Because there's only so much that you can talk about to other people and not realizing like whether they would get it or not. I know my best friend used to always say like, she used to say, I can appreciate the relationship that you and Christina have because I know that you could talk to her about things that I can't understand. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have for the rest of us is because these women can connect with other women who just quote unquote get it. They get what they're going through. They get how they may feel. They get like, you know, yes, I'm married and I'm going through cancer and I have kids, but I just don't want to today. You know, just those little things. So Christina did definitely fill in the gap for me. I think with my other friends and families, like there's parts and pieces that they could get and they could understand, but they can only understand it to a point. And sometimes you just didn't want to talk to them about certain things. I don't want to have to talk to somebody about how I'm missing my hair today for their response to be like, but it's going to come back. Fuck that.
Exactly.
I missed my hair. I don't need you to tell me that it's going to come back. I know it's going to come back. But at the same time, today I want to be mad about my hair falling out. And so I want to be able to have that space. And you just don't want to have to say that to people, right? You don't want to have to come out and be like, so this is my disclaimer. I want to talk about my hair falling out, how I'm pissed off about it. You just want to be able to word vomit all that shit out and then just be done.
Yeah. It's so... Recently, I've been needing a lot of help with stuff, and I'm calling people saying like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm teaching this new course at UW, and I'm like, I've never taught before. So I'm asking people who teach like, oh, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? 95% of the responses that I get are, you got this, Jody Ann. It's going to be so good. You got this. This is so great. And it's just like, so I didn't call for encouragement. Right. Like I actually called because I wanted some help, which asking for help is already challenging for me. And so when I don't get that help back, I'm just like, well, why am I even asking for help in the first place? Right. But there was a point in time when like I couldn't walk, like I needed help.
Right.
And even then I was trying to like, I got this,
Which we always do. Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, like, how did you react in the times when like you actually need help and you wanted something back?
And like if I got it or not?
I don't know if you got it or not, but it's like, I think like as we engage with people who maybe don't fully understand our experiences, maybe people are offering help or we're asking for help, and I feel like there's always this miss, right? Yeah. Where it's like, oh, I thought you needed this, but I didn't need that. It's like, oh, I want this, but no, I don't want that. Like, I feel like I'm constantly missing between me asking, people offering. It just doesn't always click.
And I don't really know where the disconnect is. I mean, I guess one of it could be like people just aren't really like listening. Like they're not actively listening to what you're saying. They're listening to respond, if that makes sense. Or they're listening, like they hear that you need help, but then they're like, while you're talking about maybe the help that you need, they're already thinking about what it is that you will need instead of listening to what you actually need. And like you said, yeah, the whole encouragement piece, it's just like, okay, well, let's move that out the way. But what I actually need for you to do is like, listen to what it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, like I have a hard time asking people for help anyways. I've always been that way. I've gotten better with it because of breast cancer, but I just wouldn't say anything. So people would just have to do something because I would just be like, oh, I'll just do it on my own. I'll wait till I get there. And I remember my son, he ended up like yelling at me one day because of that. My dad was going to spend the night and he was like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. You can go home. You don't have to spend the night. And I ended up getting sick in the middle of the night and just like throwing up all over the place. And my son comes in the room and he's helping me, feel better. And he just starts yelling at me. And he was like, see, this is why you should listen to people when they tell you that you need help instead of always saying you could do it yourself. And it made me laugh in the moment, but I was like, he's right. Like when people are offering, I just need to be like, okay, yes, this is what I need. And so I think I've gotten better with that now, instead of just being like, okay, well, I'm just a strong person. I can just do it myself. Now, if people are just like, okay, well, do you need this? Yes, I do need this. Especially when it comes to For the Rest of Us, because Jasmine and I are the only two people doing all of the work for this, which is a whole nother topic that we could talk about, because I don't think people realize how much work that goes into.
I hear it. I'm feeling it too. I'm like, oh, y'all, when I do the intro for the podcast, I'm like, our guest today, ain't no hour. I'm the only person behind this operation.
Right. Right.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. So now being easy with that and just being like, okay, boom, like you can help with this. We need help with this. Let's, divvy out this. And, a lot of that takes trust. You have to have trust in the other people, but sometimes you kind of just have to just let it go. And if people are going to fuck up along the way, they're going to fuck up regardless. So.
Well, I want to go back to your son, since he called you out when you're already down. He's kicking your mom while she's down. I don't know about that.
I mean, kids are good for that, man. They will kick you when you're down. They will show you like, whew, They will show you exactly who you are.
But it's interesting because you had a, conscious thinking child, right? That knew what was happening, that had access to the internet. You weren't managing an infant and dealing with breast cancer. Like, he knew what was going on. And so, what happened when your son saw your head without hair for the first time?
He didn't care. I cared more than he did. He didn't care at all.
You even hide it from him. I feel like it's obvious.
Right. But I tried to. Like, I thought I was hiding something, and he's just like, oh, okay, lady. Like, I remember even getting my hair shaved off, and like, I have long hair, and I had really long hair, and then of course I had to just shave it all off because it was coming out. And even coming home, just making sure that I had a covering on my head. So whenever I was around him, I would never show him my head being bald, because I had this stigma in my mind of like, if you're sick, then you're not strong and you're weak. And you can't take care of the people around you, which is definitely a stigma that we as Black women definitely have, that we need to work on. But
yeah,
I ended up having a hot flash one day, and I just ripped the hat or wig that I had on my head off, and my son came around the corner, and we both kind of stopped, and he looked at me, and I was just like, so like, are you okay with this? And he's just like shrugged his shoulders like, yeah, I don't care. And then from that day on, I'm just like, okay, well, cool. That was a good opening for me to just be like, it's all me. It has nothing to do with him. But, it's just, I know I looked sick. I didn't have any hair on, even if I was to go back then, like, I probably wouldn't even get a wig. I would just rock my bald head and just be okay with it. But I know that also takes some time, because, you're being ripped of everything at that point. It's not like it's a process of you being like, this is what I'm choosing to do. One thing about kids that I'm realizing with me having breast cancer is they're way more resilient than what we think they are. And I think just, giving them bits and pieces of information at a time when you're ready and when they're ready, but they pick up on stuff. So regardless if you want to tell them or not, like, they're going to know.
Oh man. Yeah. I still talk to my niece. She's 17 now. And what I found out is that my sister was trying to be hush hush about the conversations that she was having in the house. My older niece, who's 21 now, so she was 18 at the time, she's on Instagram, which I forgot until she saw, and then asked her mom about it. And so the younger one doesn't have any direct information. No one has said anything to her yet. She's not on the internet, like any of that.
Yeah.
And then I think apparently she just like stopped her parents one day and confronted my sister in the kitchen. She's like, what's going on with Auntie Jody? Does she have cancer? And I'm sure my sister was shocked. Like, I mean, who told you that? But especially when they're teenagers, I think even at younger ages, like, they'll always kind of know that something is not right. Like, something's different.
Right.
And they'll put the pieces together. So you might as well. And I talked to her about this. She said she felt like people were lying to her.
Yeah.
Like that betrayal. It wasn't enough to say, we were going to tell you, we were just trying to No, she felt lied to.
Which I get, because you're like, everybody else knows. How come I don't know?
Exactly.
Why are you hiding this from me? I ended up my hand was forced, and I ended up having to tell my son before I wanted to, because some of his peers found out because they heard their parents talking about it. And so,
yeah,
right. So once I heard, I was just like, okay, so I have to sit him down now and tell him.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing in the world is that you go to school and you hear it from one of your friends that my mom has cancer. Like,
no,
that would just crush his whole world. So I ended up having to tell him before I wanted to. But, it happened when it was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I was able to actually sit him down and be like, okay, so this is what it is.
How did you say that? What were the words?
I told him, I found a lump in my breast, and we found out that it's breast cancer, and I'm going to get the treatment that I need, and I'll keep you informed all along the process. And it was really, it was really formal like that. And I think it was a lot formal, more so, I know.
Wait, is this school? Like, what's going on?
Because I think, because my dad was there too. And so my son was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then once my dad had left, I seen he was sitting on his bed and he was crying. And he said, like, I don't want to lose you. Because at that time, his dad was in prison. And so it's like, so if my dad's away and I can't see him, and then you have cancer, and to me, cancer means you're going to die, then I'm just not going to have anybody. And so then that's when we had like, you know, a whole talk about it. And it's just like, you know, like, I'm going to be okay. And, you know, I explained to him, like, I had an aunt who was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was about 17 or 18. So, you know, I kind of explained to him, I was just like, you know, like, everybody, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. You see, she's living a long life. Like, there's all kinds of treatments, there's advancements, you know, you'll be here, you'll know what's going on. So I think just having that open conversation with him was big. And that helps for both of us. And then him just being able to see me, like not hiding the fact of like necessarily that I was sick, just laying on the couch and not feeling good. And, you know, he was going through school, of course, during that whole point in time, and he did really good in school, which, you know, he had a really good support system. He was in therapy before that, so I made sure that he was still going to see his therapist, so he had somebody to talk to. So, and I think everybody else that was around him was checking in with him as well. So I think instead of putting the burden on yourself as a parent and making sure that they're okay, setting that they have other people. I mean, therapy, everybody should do therapy. Like, I don't care who you are.
Amen.
You can get your kids in therapy, like that is a blessing, because there's things that they're going to talk to their therapist that they're not going to want to talk to you, just the same as us being, you know, people. Like, I'm going to talk to you about some things that, you know, I'm going to talk to my therapist in a different way. So
in the moments where you allowed yourself maybe to not kind of put on this front of strength in front of him, like, were you okay with that? Or did you feel like, similar to the hair thing, that, you know, if I'm on the couch laid out, that he'll think that I'm weak, or I think that I'm weak?
I think I was forced to get okay with it, because you're so sick and there's only so much you can do. And just, you know, realizing like, I can't move today. So I'm here on the couch and this is what he's going to see. And you're just going to have to see that. And I think being forced to be okay with it made me even more okay with it. With even now, it's like, you know, if I have surgery, just being up and telling them up front, like, oh, okay, I'm going to have surgery, you know, in a couple of weeks, this is what's going to happen, you know, like, so I have to get colonoscopies every year because I have a genetic mutation called Lynch syndrome that predisposes me to colon and ovarian cancer. So I have to get a colonoscopy. And so when he was home from college break just this past holiday, I was like, you know, hey, I'm going to get this colonoscopy. And he was just like, okay, well, what's that for? Like, why are we doing this?
Let me see your chart, Mom. Let me bring the chart.
And so, you know, just explained it to him, the reason why. And then he's just like, okay. And then I get home and he's just like, okay, you good? Everything's good. Everything check out okay. Just like, so he's more even involved too, which is funny because it's like, you're only 18. But I think also having a parent who was diagnosed, you know, you're always wondering and just being like, okay, so are they okay? And I think it's okay and it's healthy for your kids to be able to check in with you and make sure that you're doing okay, instead of just brushing them aside and like, you don't need to worry about this. Like, you're a kid. Like, no, they need to be a part of it, because in the long run, that's also going to help with their healthcare too, right?
Exactly.
They're going to be open and willing to want to talk about these things, or if something's not feeling good with them, talking with their providers or you and being like, hey, I'm not good. You know, one of the things that I tell, which you could talk about, you can put this in there, I don't care. But with my son, it's, I tell him, I'm just like, look, if you're having sex or whatever, if you're going to the bathroom and you feel like something's burning, let me know. We can get you to the doctor. So then that way you're not just sitting there. Like, people do dumb stuff, especially dudes. They do dumb shit all the time.
That is a fact.
So it's like, don't think that you just can pour some like peroxide on your dick and it's going to be okay. No, like, let's have a conversation. You need to get to the doctor. So it's just being open with them with healthcare, because as people of color, we need to be that way.
And you need to see it modeled. Like, it can be done. This is how you navigate it. Right. I think I was sharing on another episode or something, but the first time I ever had one-on-one time with a healthcare provider was when I was in my 20s or something. Like even as a teenager, I never was able to speak to a healthcare professional just on my own.
Oh.
Which means no one's asking me, which they know they should, but they don't, because they also feel uncomfortable like asking, are you sexually active in front of your parents? Are you,
Right.
you know, there are a lot of things that you're not addressing when you don't have that time. And so like I remember the first time my doctor asked me if I was sexually active, I immediately wanted to say no, even though I was.
Right.
To hear you just kind of modeling that openness, particularly when it comes to our bodies, when it comes to our healthcare, these are life-saving behaviors, especially for men. Men have really, really poor health-seeking behaviors. I'm convinced that any man, if they don't have a woman in their life, I don't care if it's your spouse, your friend, whatever. If you do not have a woman who loves you, you will die.
Right. Because you just don't, you're not going to go to the doctor at all. Like, not at all. Not even a little bit.
My cousin's wife, like one of his new wives, she told me, she's like, he hasn't been to the dentist in 15 years. I had to schedule the appointment for him. I'm like, you would die. Not married to this.
Like, oh my God, I'm surprised his teeth aren't falling out of his mouth already. And then like, besides that, it's like, do you know that like gum disease is like the number one thing of where you start getting all these other ailments that are going on in your body?
No, you just said that. And I'm like, man, let me go brush my teeth. I brush.
Right.
I'm gonna brush my teeth all the time.
Lord, today, like, what is going on?
Oh my gosh.
Just being open with, you know, modeling, like you said, modeling that behavior, wanting to have an open conversation when it comes to your doctors. You know, even in the clinic that I work in, we get parents all the time, especially moms, like, moms, y'all got to stop doing this with your boys because it is horrible. But especially moms who are just like emailing and calling us all the time, like, oh, little Jimmy won't do this. And, you know, I just want to make sure. And I'm just like, if you don't tell little Jimmy to get on the phone and start calling us about his symptoms instead of you, like, you're giving it to me third hand. I want to talk to the patient and see what's really going on. Because of course you're going to be on 9 when he's probably only on 4. And so let's just really hear. So like, yeah. Oh my goodness. That is one of my pet peeves with talking with moms, because I'm just like, y'all got to stop this. Because not only that, like, how are they going to learn how to navigate life?
Yes, navigate life, advocate for themselves, understand how to deal in really stressful situations where maybe everyone else has more power than you, seemingly. Right? Like, you need to be able to practice those skills. And so when people say to me, oh, Jodianne, you're so great at this. Right? I was like, I've been fighting racism like forever. Like, I'm used to advocating for myself. Like, this is just not, everybody doesn't live their life this way. Oh, I didn't know that. Right?
Yeah.
I had a cyst on my ovary when I was 15, and that was really stressful because I was also tapping that semester. And so that kind of up and down, and I'm like, oh, this hurts. And like, Jody, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, no, this thing hurts. And just having to, get people to believe me, which I think this is like chronic trauma of just existing as a Black girl, a woman of color, like all that stuff, right? Finally, it had escalated to the point where I was going to get an ultrasound. I was like, oh my God, ultrasound. I'm not pregnant. Just like 15. I haven't had sex yet. And I go to get this ultrasound. I have to drink 32 ounces of water. Right?
Oof.
Girl, I'm in the doctor's office and there's all this delay and all this kind of stuff. I have to go to the bathroom right now. I have to go. So my mom, she's up there, you know, she's nice. And she's like, hey, you know, can we go in? You know, we've been waiting for a long time. Da, 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 da. She comes back, we're still waiting. Me, 15. I go up to the counter. I say to the woman, I said, listen, I'm going to go to the bathroom right now. And this whole appointment, like everything is not happening. Okay. So I need to go to see the doctor or I'm going to go pee.
Right.
And then we went in. So I feel like when we have successes advocating for ourselves, particularly against, you know, these power dynamics, then you keep doing it. You keep repeating behavior that continues to support you. Right. Right. And then at the same time, people are like, you're too strong. You're too this, you're too that. I'm like, being strong, whatever, consistently saves my life. Right. And so sometimes, at least for me, this is something I'm working through with my therapist, is like trying to let that go. Trying to find the right balance between the advocacy and like not feeling like I have to be the project manager for the project all the time. Right.
Yeah.
And so can you tell me about how you found the lump in your breast and what that whole process was like when it started to unfold, when you find this thing and now you have to tell people with MDs behind their name about it to be able to get what you need. And I'm specifically asking about this because I kind of want an excuse to say that lotion saves lives. That's the t-shirt that I want. So I got to put that in the podcast.
Yeah. So if you do, I need one of those t-shirts.
Okay. I got you.
I'll make sure I'll post you on my Instagram. I'll be an influencer for you that day.
Perfect. So tell me about like how you found your lump and just kind of that advocacy process to get the things that you need from the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm. So I would say about 2 weeks before I actually found my lump, I had a physical. And when my doctor was doing the breast self-exam, she kind of felt something in my left breast, and her and I both kind of paused, and she just said, oh, it's probably nothing. You've been working out a lot. You probably just strained something. I remember even texting my sister as I left that appointment and saying to her, like, oh, my doctor thinks she felt something in my breast. And my sister kind of just being like, oh, it's probably, you're close to your cycle. It's probably something, so just blew it off.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, as I'm getting out of the shower and putting lotion on, I felt this huge, there goes the lotion reference, this huge mass in my left breast. And I knew right away that it was cancer, even though I still tried to talk to myself in my mind, like, oh, maybe I have like a clogged milk duct, but my son's 12. Like, just trying to, rationalize. I will say for myself, I know that I did not have the normal when it comes about of finding like a lump in my breast, just because I knew that this needed to be taken care of immediately and not letting it just go through. So I found my lump on a Saturday. That Monday, I called my primary care office and said, hey, I found a lump. I need this to get checked out. They told me that they probably couldn't get me until Thursday or Friday. And I'm just like, no, like, this is urgent. This needs to be looked at immediately. So the primary care office that I used to work at, I called them and talked to the office manager and said, hey, I found this lump. And she was like, we can get you in tomorrow. I'm like, good.
Got it.
So yeah, that Tuesday I went in. Even I seen the nurse practitioner, and even she was just like, oh, well, the one thing that she did say to me, which I'm going to tell providers, you got to stop telling your patients this, is because when she pressed down on it, she was like, and is it kind of tender? And I'm like, yeah, it's tender, a little bit painful. And she's like, oh, well, it's not breast cancer because breast cancer is not painful. Hello. Like,
I didn't know we were doing diagnostics, like this. Okay.
Yeah, right. Which I'm like, stop telling people that, because that's not true. I've heard that from plenty of women before.
Oh, that breast cancer doesn't cause pain?
If the lump that you're feeling is painful, then that's not cancer. They've told that to a lot of women.
I've heard that too. And I'm like, because I was experiencing a lot of pain for years and years and years. And I said, I think it's breast cancer. I just had this thing like, I think it might be breast cancer. And they said it wouldn't be breast cancer if it was painful. And they excused it. It's just like, well, it was cancer. It just wasn't breast cancer. like this whole like cancer pain relationship, it's different in different parts of the body. But like what you're saying, don't tell people that, because also pain is very difficult to describe.
Right.
A lot of people have different descriptions for pain. And so even when they say, is that tender? Okay, what does that mean? And so, yeah, pain is too general to just kind of discount people off of for cancer. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And it could be tender or painful, because for the past 3 days, I've been pressing on it, trying to figure out like what the hell this is in my breast. Like,
this is a fact.
It's like, hello. So yeah, so she told me that, but she was like, we'll send you in to get a mammogram. So the one thing that I love, and I always tell people, like, this is why you should not burn bridges. They got me in the next day for a mammogram. And my old boss, who's the office manager, and the nurse practitioner, both of these women that I used to work with, fought tooth and nail to get me in at Swedish to get me a mammogram the next day. Because if anybody knows, like, that is not normal at all.
Oh, yeah,
Squeezed me in. I got my mammogram. They were like, well, we're going to do an ultrasound too. And so my other thing for medical providers is I'm having my ultrasound, and the woman's like paying a lot of attention in my underarm. And because I'm in healthcare, I'm like, that's my lymph nodes. Like, this isn't good. So she gets done and she was like, okay, she was like, yep, I'm pretty sure this is cancer.
Okay.
I'm just like, what?
Can we get the results?
Right. So I'm just like, I said, so how do you know this? And she said, well, because, when you see a tumor on the ultrasound, it has jagged edges around it. So if it's smooth, then that's like a cyst, but a tumor, it's going to be jagged. And she's like, yours is jagged. So, I'm pretty sure this is cancer. Again, I have not had a biopsy, so you cannot say this. But that took me into a whole tailspin because at this point, I'm like, she's an ultrasound tech. She's seen all of these before. She knows what she's talking about. So I go out in the waiting room and I just start bawling. And I call my sister. I'm like, they're telling me it's cancer. And they were like, well, let's set you up for a biopsy. They wanted to do a biopsy in 2 weeks. And I'm just like, no. Like for me, at this point, time is of the essence.
Yeah, especially because you just did the breast exam and it felt different to you 2 weeks later. So I don't have 2 weeks.
Right. And it doubled in size. So for me, that's what I'm knowing. Because when I had my breast exam with my primary care provider, at that point, it was really small. 2 weeks later, it had grown to like 4 centimeters.
Yeah.
So I'm just like,
can't wait 2 weeks, sis. It's not going to happen.
Right. So they scheduled me for it. And again, I called my old office manager, whose name is Barb. And I told her, I'm like, look, can you try to get me in like sometime sooner? And they did. They got me in that Friday. This is why when you develop good relationships with people, don't burn bridges. Like they will treat you well and they will help you get into the things that you need. And so they worked some magic and got me in that biopsy that Friday. And I remember what's funny, which I'm just now remembering, is when I went in for that biopsy, when they did the ultrasound, they seen the tumor and they thought they seen something underneath my armpit. And usually what they do is they have the same person, the ultrasound tech, do the biopsy at the same time since they've seen everything. But I had to have somebody else because they're seeing something different. So when he's going in to want to do the biopsy underneath my arm, he's like, I don't see what she's seen then. So he made her come in from her appointment to look and see. And she was like, I can't see it either. Thank God. So whatever that was that she's seen, it just wasn't there at all anymore. Because that freaked me out. Because I'm like, so it spread to my lymph nodes at this point, right?
Yeah.
And from that point, my whole treatment regimen just kind of was like fast paced. I remember that weekend, me calling or texting people and letting them know, like, I probably have breast cancer. I'm not going to know till Monday. So I think for me, that was mentally me preparing them. Because then when I got the news that Monday that it was breast cancer, I didn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And I think mentally for me, that's what I needed to do. Because I didn't want to have to tell people over again once I was diagnosed. So it's like, I'm diagnosed, let me deal with this. Because I have a lot of shit that I have to process. So I told everybody that weekend. And then Monday, the doctor, her name is Dr. Gromko. You guys should see her. She's amazing, by the way. She actually called me herself because she got the results. And one of the things that she said is, I hate that we have to write this chapter in your story, but if we're going to write it, let's make it a damn good one. She said, but yes, you do have breast cancer. And like they set me up, I think that was a Monday. By that Wednesday, I was in with the breast surgeon, talking about what I wanted to do. And then I seen the oncologist either the next day or that Friday, but everything was really fast, quick, which is what anybody should have.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be just because I work in healthcare and that I have relationships that I'm able to have that type of treatment. I want all people to have that type of treatment. I don't take it lightly that I have that type of access. And for me, like, when we're talking about privilege, which I try to tell people about this because nobody understands privilege, right? That's my privilege.
Yeah.
I work in healthcare, so I have that privilege to be able to have these type of relationships with people. And so I can get healthcare really quickly. Like if I have something going on, I could text the doctor I work with right now and ask him about it and I'll get an answer. People don't have access like that. So that's my privilege. And so, my treatment, it went through really fast paced and quick. And I loved it. I mean, I wish everybody could have that type of treatment for it. I ended up getting a second opinion, which I do recommend to anybody who's diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. They definitely get a second opinion. I went with the second oncologist. And that was just because of asking some people within the community what they thought where I should get my treatment at. Both oncologists, their treatment plan was pretty much aligned the same. But the second oncologist, I just liked her bedside manner. It was a woman, and I'd rather have a woman than a man. And she was at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. So that's one of the reasons why I went there. And so,
I'm still reflecting on the, making sure that this chapter in your story is a damn good one. I think that's so touching because everyone can get, the book is still being written. You know, people say that all the time, but you never know what what people don't say when they say that, oh, your book is still being written. It's like, oh, you don't know what chapters are, right? You don't know what's coming, right? There's not some nice story that continues to unfold. Like there's some serious moments in there. And so when you reflect, I don't want to say back or maybe it is back. I don't know. Like when you think about this chapter in your story, is it a good one? Is it closed? You know, have we moved on to new chapters? Is it in a Google Doc and it's being written? You know, that chapter, that doc is still open, you know. How do you reflect back on the story of your breast cancer experience?
I would say that chapter's done, but I've definitely have went on to maybe a sub chapter now where that's where my advocacy comes in and for the rest of us. When I finished radiation, I remember saying, writing in my social media posts, this chapter's closed. I don't even want to write an addendum. I don't want to go back and, revisit it.
It's out.
Yeah. So for me, I would say, yeah, that chapter is definitely done. I think I needed to go through that. There's definitely a lot of lessons that were learned through that whole process. And I think now I'm just writing what this part is within, my whole book of life, I guess you could say. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the chapter. I'm okay with how it went. I don't regret anything during that process. It just, it is what it is. I wouldn't wish cancer on my worst enemy. I'm sure everybody could probably say that, but definitely.
I have a couple enemies. I'm just saying.
Would you wish cancer on them though?
All right. Do you want to be transparent?
Yes.
I have definitely wished a severe cancer on one person before.
Oh, okay. How's that working out for you?
Okay. Quick story. Spinal cancer, disability, resentment, darkness, whatever. In that time, I had some friends who I felt very abandoned by in a very direct way. She literally wrote me an email saying, I've been suffering for too long and I don't care about anybody else.
Oh.
I just learned how to walk 3 weeks ago. Just So her and her girlfriend, they surf a lot. And I would spend a lot of time in my journal wishing that there was some devastating accident or that she found something that also created the level of similar physical trauma that I was experiencing. And I kept that very close to me, wanting this. Fast forward a year later, someone that we both know messaged me on Instagram. And I think they don't know that, I don't talk to them anymore. And he said, yeah, Polly had this freak accident surfing. The surfboard lodged into her back near her spine.
Oh my God.
And that is this is a normal response. Oh my God. And I laughed.
Oh.
And when I realized that was in me, I was like, when I laugh when I'm stressed, but that didn't feel like a stress laugh. That felt like I don't believe I manifested that. Ooh, right? Fast forward a year after that, I saw this bitch riding her bike in Cap Hill. I was so mad.
Man, I'm still dealing with all these side effects and stuff, and here you are,
just riding your goddamn bike up a hill. This one, I would never bike up a hill. And so, but when you ask, would you really wish that? I do wish that I didn't wish that, because that took up so much energy to be wanting this for her.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a little bit closer to your side of I don't want to wish this on people. This is really, really bad. And I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, because the process of wishing that on someone that you hate or someone that you're not in a good place with does not help you.
Yeah.
And I'm slowly realizing that. I think yesterday I decided that I should let it go.
I mean, it's all a process. As long as you're making the process, that's all good.
But anyway, back to your point, good person who's so wonderful and wouldn't wish cancer on their enemy.
I wouldn't say all that. I mean, a little sugar in somebody's gas tank or anything, I'm okay with that. But,
I remember what we were talking about before I went on my tangent of like telling the world that I'm just not a good person sometimes.
Well, I know I said I wouldn't wish cancer on anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's necessarily, definitely chemo. Chemo is a beast all in itself, but
like, yeah. Well, when we say that, like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone else. Does that feel like kind of martyrdom to you? Because you had it. Or is it just like the luck, like you had it, you don't want anyone else to have it? Like, I don't know if you felt that, like this feeling of this is unfair.
Yeah, I definitely asked myself a couple of times, or just asked, God and the universe, like, why me? Like, why am I being chosen for this? I think I'm realizing now why. It's just, being a voice for other women, or other women being able to look up and be like, okay, well, she went through this, and not to say like I can't go through this, but, seeing her process and what can I pick out of that process to help me through my own type of thing. So I think that is one of the lessons and the reasons why I was chosen for this. I mean, you couldn't, if you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago, you asked me if I was going to be doing this, I'd be like, no, there's no way possible. And now it's like, here I am.
Yeah. So do you think, I think this is what we were talking about with the chapters, that for the rest of us is that next chapter somewhat?
It's definitely that next chapter. Definitely been writing it. Would love to see it, which I'm sure it's going to continue to grow. I know a lot of women are, they've told us that, they're thankful for the place. They're thankful being able to go to a website and read stories, or having other women that they could talk to. So it's definitely the second part of that chapter. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds or what that leads to. But it definitely is. And I think just the patient advocacy part, I think for me, I can definitely tie into my healthcare experience and been working in healthcare for so long. And then also just what I've learned on the patient side of being a patient with breast cancer, tying those two things together.
So you've been doing so much work, I think, to make safe spaces for women of color, which we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only as a space to just manage healthcare, but like manage our personhood, manage trauma, kind of manage who we are. And so where do you think like that those safe spaces are for you? How have you created a safe space for yourself and the things that you need?
With family and friends, for sure, taking that time out for myself, making sure, being able to go on vacation or spend time with people, not looking at my email. Like I was just telling somebody today, like making it more apparent, like yesterday, Sundays for myself, of not doing any type of work and just shutting down, because I know when we first started for the rest of us, I was definitely doing that a lot, and that ran me down. So I wasn't able to work out like I wanted to or take care of myself. So just recognizing those point in times and just being like, no, like I'm important. Like I need to take some time out for myself. Even when it came to the holidays this past year, of just being like, during Christmas time, like not working. And just realizing like people have to realize like, I have a life too. I have a life outside of this. I need to be able to like focus on that life. Like I can't have and develop relationships with people or have a significant other if I'm always constantly doing this 24/7. I think we come into this whole generation of like, oh, you just always have to be working. And yeah, even though it's a pandemic, like you should be doing this and you should like, I'm just like, no, like mentally, this is a lot on top of everything else that you're going through. So I've definitely created those spaces for myself of taking care of myself and surrounding myself with people who like we're all just going to, uplift each other and be accountable to each other.
Yeah. Take time for you. And thank you for taking time for having this conversation with me. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
Well, definitely plug for the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Everybody should know. So you can definitely find myself and all the women up for the Breast of Us at breastofus.com. We're also on all social media. So Instagram for the Breast of Us, Facebook for the Breast of Us, Twitter, the Breast of Us. If you want to reach myself, you can email me at marissa@breastofus.com. We do a monthly live podcast on Facebook called Baddies Talk Back.
Love it.
On the third Thursday of the month, we talk about all different types of topics that aren't necessarily have to do in terms with breast cancer. So it's like dating, sex after treatment. One of them was like the burden of being strong, kind of something that you and I had talked about. So there's always different things going on there. So definitely check us out, support us. One way you can support is just by liking or sharing something. It's really easy.
Yeah.
For myself, I would just like to say thank you for having me on.
Oh my
Would
God,
love
thank
to
you.
do this again. I think we have a good, back and forth here. So whenever you want to have me on, let me know. I would love it. This is great.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, like, as someone who, this is so weird, but sometimes I get a little jealous of the breast cancer community because I'm like, oh, y'all are tight. I don't know anybody else who had a, well, at least y'all know each other, right? I don't know anyone else with a spinal cord injury or had a spinal cord injury due to a tumor or whatever.
Right.
But when I was navigating my own situation, just to see the amount of resources of any type of cancer, it was so helpful to me. So what I would just encourage people is, like, regardless of what cancer you have, there could still be a lot that you can draw from it. And not even fine I don't think For the Breast of Us even existed when I was going through this, because I was really struggling to find any type of cancer story from a person of color's perspective or even image. I couldn't find anything. So I felt really isolated. And so I would just say, breast cancer or not, if you have it, someone who has it, be it breast cancer or any type of other cancer, I do think kind of tapping into these spaces or even kind of normalizing your social media feeds with these types of conversations can make you navigate maybe your own situation a little bit better, or support someone who maybe is currently going through it or might be going through it soon. Like, we're all touched by cancer in some way. Like, you never know when someone might get a diagnosis and then you start saying the wrong things and maybe that relationship severs. And so, yeah, I think everyone should check out For the Breast of Us. I found I'm not like in the community, but I like seeing the pages. I like seeing folks who are kind of owning themselves and creating safe spaces for themselves and kind of owning that story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been beautiful to see, like, just seeing other organizations or pages that are popping up. And it's just like, yes, like, this is what, one of the things that we definitely wanted. It's like, we definitely wanted to develop For the Breast of Us for that, but then to also see other, cancer patients like yours, or other ones that are just popping up. And it's like, okay, so now we actually have a voice and a platform.
Black Cancer is created, edited, and produced by me, Jody Amburi. Thank you so much, Marissa, for sharing your story with us. To make sure that other Black cancer stories become center to how we talk about cancer, like, subscribe, all the internet things, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Check out our website, blackcancer.co, and on Instagram @black_cancer. Trauma comes with endless wisdom for ourselves and those around us. Tell someone you know about Black cancer.